Ukraine's response to the 28-point peace plan, Volodymyr Zelensky saying, "This is going to be one of the most difficult moments in our history. Ukraine faces a very tough choice, either lose our dignity or risk the loss of a key partner." Didn't say who that was, but we guess Donald Trump. "Either the difficult 28 points or an extremely harsh winter, the hardest yet." Europe has also said opposed this plan for many different reasons, the biggest one being NATO security guarantees not on it. They've said they will protect, of course, Ukraine and Europe's interests. It seems like they're melting down. They're very concerned. Why are they so concerned? And why is especially Zelensky talking about this harshest winter yet? Those are pretty ominous words.
You know, there's the old saying, fool around and find out. Ukraine fooled around and they're finding out. The Ukrainian army is being slaughtered systemically right now on the battlefield. Again, I saw a comment said online and said, guys, just shut up. If you're going to accuse me of something, do your homework. I've been consistent as the day is long. Ukraine's losing this war. They're losing men by the bushelful. And, you know, that's just the reality of it. The casualty figures today, even though overall the casualty rates is around 10-1, today the ratio is much higher because the Russians are dominating the battlefield in every way possible. But that's just the reality. Ukraine's about to lose some of their best brigades, the 25th Brigade, the 38th Marine Brigade, I think the 92nd Air Assault Brigade. These are all NATO-trained formations that are now permanently stuck, and they're all going to die. And when they die, they don't just, you know, it's not just the equipment, but it's the trained manpower, and there is no replacement. The replacements are guys who are getting bonked on the head and dragged off to, perfunctory military training and then thrown to the front line and dying. So this is the reality that Zelensky's facing. The other reality is, the Ukrainians tried to take on, the Russian oil industry and try to harm. This again is a British plan that was, very well researched. I mean, the British found, identified all the nodes where all the energy nodes are, and then, facilitated the Ukrainians with intelligence. And Ukrainians launched drones that were specifically designed to defeat Russian air defense, wooden drones, slow flying. The radar signature replicates that of a flock of birds. This is the time of year when flocks of birds are flying all over the place. And then these drones would hit the Russian, oil refinery, oil distribution, etc. Well, I just, again, had a fascinating conversation with the guy who is on the committee that marries the Ministry of Defense with the Russian energy, with the oil producing and gas producing energy team on how to defend against this, basically the counter drone program and how to protect these facilities. And he said, yes, we got hit. We got hit. He said none of it was permanent. I mean, Russia is, after all, a giant gas station with nuclear weapons, if you listen to certain people, but they have a lot of spare parts. And when these refineries are hit, the Russians are able to isolate the damage and then rapidly repair it and get the refinery back up and running. And so, there is no permanent, long-standing damage to the Russian economy, unlike everything that they are saying on Twitter and everything else. There's some temporary shortages in certain areas of the country, driven by, the impact of this, but the diversion of resources or redistribution, and boom, there's no car lines, none whatsoever. And the price of gas has not gone up that much. It's gone up a little bit, but not that much. There's diesel. So all this fiction you hear on Twitter and everything else just is absolute BS. What isn't BS is that the Russians have now destroyed every single major electricity producing facility in Ukraine. None are up. They're all gone. They're finished. And Russia will continue to pound them. Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to repair them. Europe right now is panicked, trying to come in and find ways to divert electricity into Ukraine, or to help them repair things or come up with generator capacity. But that's it. It's over for Ukraine. And this is the reality. If this winter gets cold, and it's cold, I mean, it's not the worst. The temperatures right now are hovering right around zero. Moscow had its first snow, and then the snow melted. I think there's some patches on the ground right now. St. Petersburg had a significant snowfall. But Ukraine, it's going to get cold. It always gets cold. And come a month from now, going into February, early March, Ukraine's going to be a popsicle with no electricity, no gas to warm it up. This is going to lead to societal collapse. And this is what Zelensky understands. And then we throw on top of that the corruption scandal. We always knew that Ukraine was fundamentally corrupt, no matter how much the Democrats tried to deny it or paper it over. There was a time Seymour Hersh reported on this where the director of the CIA, William Burns, had to fly to Ukraine and confront Zelensky directly. And it wasn't that, oh, you're being corrupt. It was, look, we understand you had, because I mean, in defense of Zelensky, the reality of the Ukrainian system of government is that you have to buy people off. Gosh, look at the United States Senate. Who was it? Senator Johnson or somebody was when asked if you're going to ban insider trading, he said no. If you ban insider trading, then who's going to run for Senate? What's the incentive? And he said it out loud. It basically, no, you got to have to give us the right to get rich. We have to be able to get rich in here, or else there's no reason for us to come to the Senate. All right. Well, so America is one of the most fundamentally corrupt democracies in the world, because that's the reality. When you become a representative or a senator, you get rich because you get insider trading. The system is geared to enable that to happen. Ukraine is geared in a similar fashion. Money that gets allocated gets into the pockets of these people. And that's just the way it goes. And when more money comes in, to sustain a wartime system of governance, Zelensky has to allow people to get rich. That's why they support him. They don't support him because they love him. They don't support him because he's the greatest, democratic representative the world has ever seen. They love him because he facilitates corruption that makes everybody rich. And so the United States allows this to happen. But Zelensky was taking so much money that William Burns actually had to come in and say, you can't take that much. We'll let you take, I think that amount was $400 million. But we're going to cap it at $400 million, and you just can't take any more than that. I just want to remind all the Americans in there that that's $400 million of U.S. taxpayer money. Okay. And for all you Europeans out there, that's your money as well. And so now we have this scandal that's been exploded. There's some reason to believe that the United States may have been behind the leaking of this document specifically to undermine Zelensky and put him in a very difficult situation. But, the fact is Zelensky's been called out as a corrupt individual. He has no legitimacy, no mandate. The only thing that allows him to govern is the corruption. And so Zelensky's facing a very, very hard winter. He may not survive this winter. Understand that when you're that corrupt, you just don't get to walk away from what you've done, especially when you have the 1.52 million Ukrainian souls, haunting you in everything you've done. When Europe basically has predicated its ability to grow economically and politically on the sustainment of the Ukraine conflict. If Ukraine collapses, see, this 28-point peace plan isn't about just Ukraine collapsing. It's the end of Europe. It's literally the end of Europe. Europe will not survive this. European political and economic elites, because they are thoroughly linked to Ukraine and the future of Ukraine. So, those Europeans aren't going to be happy about Zelensky as well. I just don't see Zelensky sailing off to a nice peaceful retirement. I think he gets the Diem treatment, and anybody who wants to know what that is, go back and study Vietnam and what the CIA did to President Diem when he became inconvenient to the United States.
Yeah, great point, Scott. And I wanted your comment on, there was some rumors flying around about this 28-point peace plan being leaked. You said maybe to put Zelensky in a difficult position. And right after that, the United States Trump administration said Zelensky has a timeline to accept this or lose weapons, lose intel sharing. And but we've also seen Keith Kellogg. He is now on the outs. He is leaving after his term as U.S. envoy to Ukraine ends, his 1-year term. So is there a connection to this, Scott? This 28-point peace plan coming out and Keith Kellogg's ouster?
Yeah, I believe there is. Again, this is just informed speculation. I don't have anybody calling me on the phone saying this is what's happening. But, Keith Kellogg has been the whisperer, the Ukraine whisperer in Trump's ear. And he's the big guy that's been giving Trump all the bad information about Ukraine. And for a while, Trump literally bought into it. Alaska was a wake-up call to Donald Trump because Alaska, the Russians put the marker down on what the limits are, what their expectations are, what reality is. And Trump was compelled to accept this because he had no other choice. Kellogg then came back afterwards and helped facilitate the group of 7 that came marching into the White House to confront Donald Trump, and all this stuff. Kellogg was behind that. And for a while, it looked like Kellogg was on the rise because Trump started talking about tomahawks and started talking about all this sort of stuff. And then Marco Rubio had a phone call with Sergei Lavrov, and it was a very difficult phone call for Marco Rubio because Lavrov went undiplomatic and just straight up said to the equivalent of, you guys have to stop listening to Keith Kellogg and all the other stupid people because you're just dead wrong. We're not playing this game. You know what our conditions are. We're not changing. We don't care about you. We can live without you. I was told this over and over and over again. Russia can unplug from the United States. Russia can unplug from Europe and survive. They won't thrive, but they can survive. And Russia's ready to do this. And Lavrov basically told Rubio to pound sand, that you're not going to get anything that you want. And that went back to Trump. And I think that's when Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev flew here to the United States. Went down to Miami, and everybody's probably asking, like I did, why is he going to Miami? What's in Miami? Well, now we know. Steve Witkoff was in Miami. Witkoff, has a residence in Florida, and Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev started crafting this 28-point peace plan because it's premised on Russian reality. There's still some issues there. It's politics. Trump's not going to give away the farm up front, but this document, together with the annex that hasn't been released yet, largely reflects the Russian position. There's certain things we already talked about: 600,000 men, frozen line of contact, et cetera, that aren't going to survive. I don't see Russia conceding on these things, but Kellogg is finished because now he's been exposed as a liar, or thoroughly stupid and incompetent, or both. But the president doesn't trust Keith Kellogg anymore. And so now Kellogg is done, finished. And there's some belief that he leaked a version of the 28 points to the press through Axios in order to undermine the plan, to give the Ukrainians and the Europeans a chance to say no and to oppose Trump, et cetera. And if he did that, then he's a frickin' traitor, the kind of traitor that should be put up against a wall and shot. This is a guy, remember, Keith Kellogg is a guy that, just last month marched up to Zelensky and got one of the highest awards the Ukrainians could give to an American special envoy who's supposed to work for the president of the United States, but apparently has been working for the Ukrainians all along.
Are we entering a kind of game again? I feel like the last time we were in serious U.S.-Russia talks, we had Europe do what it's doing now, which is saying, they're meeting with Zelensky on this emergency basis. Merz, Macron, Starmer, they're all saying, well, no, we're getting troops ready. We're getting more assistance ready for Ukraine to undermine this. What do you make of this? It just feels like there is this cycle that repeats, and then After your reaction, I'll play how Putin responds. He's almost foreshadowing this as well. So what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think this is why this 28-point peace plan was leaked. So, Kellogg can indirectly get one last charge out of the Europeans. Let's just make it as clear as possible. There will be no European troops deployed to Ukraine for several reasons. One, they don't have any to deploy. I mean, I just keep wondering where they're going to come from. France did a major logistical exercise 2 years ago. The maximum number of troops that the French were able to mobilize and project outside of France was 12,500. If you think 12,500 troops is going to tip the scales of the battlefield, and you don't know what you're talking about. The British simply don't have an army. They don't. They don't have any artillery. They gave away all of their self-propelled artillery. Great Britain has no more self-propelled artillery. It's all been gone to Ukrainians, and they're all getting destroyed. You could put the entire British Army into a major soccer stadium in Europe and have 30,000 unsold seats. So the Brits have no ability whatsoever to project power. Germany, the Germans, there was a poll in Germany earlier this year that said if Germany was invaded, only 16% of the male population would be willing to fight and die for Germany, to repulse the invasion. 16%. Now imagine what that number is going to look like if Germany's trying to project power into Ukraine. There's just no support, and the German military is a fundamentally broken military. I mean, you can have all these Fourth Reich Nazis like Merz and company out there talking about we're going to build the largest military. It's just bull. Build it with what? German defense. Rheinmetall lost 20% of its stock value in the last couple of months. There's no steel production capacity anymore. There's just nothing. Germany can do nothing. They can't project power. Poland, they run out of artillery ammunition in 14 days. So there's no European army being projected in Ukraine at all. There could be a force of several thousand. That's all the forces combined together that could go in as peacekeepers if there was a ceasefire and the Russians agreed to it. But those peacekeepers wouldn't be deployed unless the United States backed them up, and the United States isn't willing to do this right now. So Europe on its own will not be deployed troops to Ukraine. Straight up, simple statement of fact. So the Europeans have nothing. They can't threaten Donald Trump with anything because Trump will just call their bluff. We're going to do this. Do it. Do it. I mean, that's all Trump has to do. It. Shut up and do it. Quit telling me what you're going to do and do it. Well, we can't do it. Then shut up. Because if you're going to say you can't do it without American backing, we're not going to back you. So pound sand. Oh, yeah, Germany. You got the lead on NATO right now. We're done. What? You can't leave. You have all the communication support and the logistics planning, and we've got no capacity to do anything. We have no air power. Our Air Force has not been properly maintained for decades. We can barely get 5 airplanes off the ground at any one time. Don't go away, America. I mean, Trump holds all the cards, literally. NATO is nothing, dysfunctional. It's just a huge waste of money. So I don't think the Europeans are going to get very far this time. There isn't Keith Kellogg backing him up with his lies. Marco Rubio's just basically washed his hands of Ukraine. He is singularly focused on Venezuela right now. And so, the Europeans are going to get nowhere with this. It's over for Ukraine. Zelensky is right. He's facing an extraordinarily difficult choice.
This text wasn't discussed with us in detail, and I can surmise why. I guess the reason is the same. The US administration still hasn't been able to secure the approval of Ukraine. Ukraine opposes to that. Obviously, Ukraine and its European allies still harbor illusions and still dream of delivering a strategic defeat to Russia. I think this position is not due to low levels of competence. I won't discuss this side of the matters now, but I think this position is due to lack of objective information on the real situation on the ground, on the battlefield. And obviously, neither Ukraine nor Europe realizes what this ultimately may lead to.
Very diplomatic of Vladimir Putin. Help us interpret that, Scott.
Well, basically what he said is that the peace plan that's been leaked was not coordinated with the Russian government, meaning that it didn't go through Russian staffing. It didn't come out from the foreign ministry. Kirill Dmitriev has been given a mandate to further the Alaska process, but he's not a replacement for the foreign ministry. And so I think what he was working out with Steve Witkoff was a plan of the possible, not the plan, but the plan of the possible. And that by leaking it, whoever leaked it, Keith Kellogg, got ahead of the staffing process. Putin was basically saying that this was done because Trump isn't in control of the Ukrainians. He's not in control of Europe. He's not in control of his own staff. I mean, Keith Kellogg leaked this document. He should be arrested, charged with treason, literally, because that's what he did, undermining the sitting president on a matter of national security. But basically, Putin is saying that if the Europeans and the Ukrainians believe they're going to be able to get something out of this process other than what Russia is willing to give them, it's fuel. Russia is going to continue to wage this war. Russia has the strategic momentum across the entire line of contact. Russia is dominating the air war. Russia has effectively ended the energy war. There was this tit for tat energy thing going on. Ukraine's energy is 100% suppressed, and it will get even worse as the Russians continue to strike. And Russia has adapted to Ukraine's tactics. I'm here in Moscow. I went to dinner the other night in Moscow City, which is a new high-rise part of Moscow, very modern. And I ate at one of these restaurants. It's up on the 89th floor of the tallest building, and you get the full panoramic view. These buildings were struck twice during the early phases of the Ukraine, attacks on Moscow. The Ukrainian drones. I mean, I asked the guys I was with. I'm like, aren't you worried about Ukrainian drones? And ain't no drone going to hit this building. Ain't no drone going to hit the center of Moscow. We got them like this. The Russians have secured Moscow. Some drones get into the suburbs and stuff, but it's the drone war is over. The war of the cities is finished. Ukraine lost, and if they want to continue to play stupid games, the Russians have the ability to continue to escalate. I'm just finishing up a paper right now on the Oreshnik and what that means to have an intermediate range missile, a strategic capacity to have been used in combat for the first time in history. It represents an escalatory capability that Russia still has in its pocket. Russia hasn't reached the point where, if we do anything further, we have to use nuclear weapons. Now Russia has the ability to ratchet it up strategically without nuclear weapons. And, if this is just another capability that Russia has that the West doesn't. And the Russians have developed, new systems. Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister, hinted at that. I think one of them is the Iskander-S, which basically is the Iskander missile that's been given now intermediate range capability that extended the range of the Iskander so it can strike deep into Europe. And they may have done the same thing with the 9M 729 missile. This was a controversial system that the United States accused Russia of cheating with back in 2019. This is why the United States withdrew from the INF treaty. At that time, the Russians said they weren't cheating, and I believe them. But now that the INF treaty is no more because the United States withdrew from it, I believe that the Russians have gone back to that system and made certain modifications, and that system now has INF range, 1,200 kilometers, perhaps even more. And the Russians are again using that. According to some reports, Russia has used this missile a number of times, against Ukraine. But they, launching it at longer ranges just to prove a point that they can strike Ukraine from 1,200 kilometers out. Imagine what they could do if they move that closer. How deep they could go into Europe. So Russia has this ability to escalate the fight right now that Europe simply doesn't possess, and Ukraine doesn't possess.
Since you're in Russia, maybe you can tell us, I know that you've gone several times now, but I'm sure you learn something new every trip. What would you like to impart about your trip thus far that has been new in terms of what you've learned and how it's relevant maybe to this moment?
The Russian people from top to bottom are tired of this war. That's a reality. There's pain in the eyes of everybody when I talk to them about this war. This war has impacted Russian society significantly. People have loved ones that are fighting. I just had lunch with a man whose son, out of patriotic duty, he wasn't, drafted. He basically told his father, I can't go on with my life right now if I don't serve my country in a time of war. And he went out and he signed a contract, and it's a contract for the duration, meaning you're not signing a, like in the U.S., you do a 2-year enlistment, a 4-year enlistment, a 6-year enlistment. These are duration contracts. You're signing for the duration of the conflict. That is, you are going to fight until you either die or there's victory. And the combination of pride and sorrow in this man's eyes was real. But that's the point. They're tired of this war, but they're also determined that there will be no peace without victory. And that's the toast that's always out there. Peace, but first victory. And the Russians are thoroughly behind their leadership in this fight. You can listen to Gilbert Doctorow all you want. He has no frickin' clue what he's talking about when it comes to the reality of the Russian social elite and how they, according to him, they're ready to throw Putin out in the streets and all that. No, they're not. The opposition parties, and I've spoken with them, they say, look, in the last in the last election for president, we didn't run anybody against Putin, not because we're not a opposition party, but because we love Russia, and Vladimir Putin is the leader right now, and we are behind our leader. We will run people for parliament because we want to have our point of view represented, and we want to be able to put pressure on Vladimir Putin, but we're not here to undermine the president in a time of war. And this is the reality. The Russian people are thoroughly behind this man and thoroughly behind the concept of winning this war. And, the other thing is Russia is winning decisively, and people need to understand that this isn't just about what's happening on the battlefield. This has been a broad spectrum attack on Russia through economic sanctions, unprecedented in history, the seizure of assets. Russia faces Russophobia in the United States and Europe. This is, again, a broad spectrum attack on Russia. And yet, despite everything, Russia's winning, not just a little bit. Russia's winning decisively. And this is the reality.